America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
Please subscribe to the show at Salem Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. And now it's time for our interview with John Motta. John owns 32 Dunkin franchises in New Hampshire and Virginia. He's been with the company for over 40 years and has held a number of titles and worked on a number of committees. He is also the chairman of the Coalition of Franchisees. John, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, your resume is absolutely amazing. Tell us a little bit about the early days with Dunkin' Donuts and climbing the ranks there and ultimately becoming an entrepreneur.
Yes, well, my entire family are all immigrants. They all came from the Azores, which is some islands that are part of Portugal. And all factory workers when they came here and very hard workers. We had one of our Portuguese friends, and he's actually a distant cousin of mine, who actually got a job at Dunkin' Donuts at an early age in the early 60s. And he actually worked for the founder of Dunkin' Donuts, Bill Rosenberg. And Bill liked him so much that he gave him a free franchise in Providence, Rhode Island. And that's where it all began. His name is Manny Andrade. He's still alive in Florida. And he was the first Portuguese to get involved with Dunkin'. And from Manny, he then got his brother-in-laws involved, his brothers involved. They got their brothers-in-laws involved and more relatives and cousins. And it just started to snowball through the years. My dad, who is a brother-in-law to Manny's brother, got his first franchise in 1980. And that's when I came into the business. I went to work with my dad. He bought his first franchise up in Massachusetts. We all moved out of Rhode Island, where we grew up, and moved to Massachusetts to go work with my dad. He then, a few years later, purchased another location up in New Hampshire, and I moved up to New Hampshire to go run the location as a manager for my dad. From there, in 1987, I purchased my first franchise up in New Hampshire. My dad eventually sold me his franchise, and that was the beginning of me and Dunkin' Donuts. And from there, kids were involved. My grandkids work for me, so we've got fourth generation now working at my Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, that is a great franchise. It's funny, John. I know your industry well because prior to running Job Creators Network, I actually worked at a company called CSM Bakery Products. And we actually supplied all of your icings and your fillings. So you were actually my largest customer as an organization. So we loved working with Dunkin', coming up with some great ideas. So it's a really, really fun franchise. And so I enjoyed being your vendor.
Yeah, it is a great franchise. I mean, I've been with them for 43 years and haven't regretted one day yet.
Yeah. Speaking of franchises, you are the chairman of the Coalition of Franchisee Associations. I've spoken before your board and the organization many times, and I love doing it every time. Always honored to do it. An amazing organization. Not as many people have probably heard about it, but I want to make sure we spread the word about the organization because it is phenomenal. We've actually been involved in many conversations, even if you remember when we were talking about the Paycheck Protection Program, where we set up that call with Secretary Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, talk about some of the issues there. You guys are a powerhouse organization. I want more people to talk about it. So let's go ahead and talk about it right now. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, well, the Coalition of Franchisee Associations, actually, our members are the associations that represent the franchisees from different franchise groups. We have anywhere from McDonald's franchisees, Dunkin' franchisees, all the way down to Kuman and others like that. So we have large franchise organizations and smaller franchise organization. And we are proud to say that we are the only organization in the country that actually is the real voice of the franchisee. There are other organizations that claim that they represent franchisees, but we're the only one that only represents franchisees only. We do not represent franchisors. We do not represent vendors. We represent the voice of the franchisee. So we feel that's very important. Our numbers, we employ millions and millions of people in our
Yeah, walk us through
industry.
some of the numbers because it's so impressive. The number of franchisees you represent, and then the number of employees. I mean, these are impressive numbers. Tell us
Yeah,
about that.
I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but it's like as Alfredo stated, the numbers. I know employees that are in the double-digit millions of
Yeah,
employees that we hire
yeah,
through our association. We represent thousands and thousands of franchisees. I don't want to quote the wrong number, but I know it's in the double-digit thousands, of franchisees.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we are a large organization, and when we do go and lobby up in Washington D.C., they do listen to us. We don't get much action in D.C. as we all know, but they are very they're willing to sit down with us and listen to our issues, and sometimes issues do get taken care of. But as we all know, in D.C., it's really hard to get
yeah.
something pushed through.
Yeah, yeah. What I love about your organization, John, is that you truly are. Our the name of our podcast, Main Street Matters. You guys truly are the main street that matters.
Yeah.
I mean, I truly, like I said, I mean, we've known each other for years, become friends. Many of your board members, I've gotten to know well. And it really is what I love is that you guys truly represent I mean, you guys are the heartbeat of what's going on. And so when there are issues out there, I mean, these are the people who are hiring what people have to understand is that you guys are the ones that are doing all the hiring, taking all the risks, putting your own capital on the line. I mean, you guys are the guys who are driving the success of our communities and frankly of our country as small business owners, whether you're a franchisee owner or franchise owner of one unit or multiple units like you are. I mean, it really is the voice of small business, and so that's why I love talking about you guys. I love trying to promote you any opportunity I can. When the people want to know what the real story is on what's going on the actual streets. Again, I love your work, John.
Yeah, actually, the biggest misconception out there is, what is a franchise, right? So many people may drive down Main Street and see a McDonald's sign, see a Dunkin' sign, and many people out there automatically attribute that location to a big corporate headquarters, whether it's in Illinois or whether it's in Massachusetts. They tend to think that that location is a location that is governed by the franchisor, the big corporation. Many people do not understand that, when you see a Dunkin' sign, a McDonald's sign, that these are actually your neighbors. These are actually small business people that are living in your community. They sponsor your soccer teams, your baseball teams. These are actually, as Alfredo said it, Main Street local people that are running this business. It's not being run by corporate headquarters in Massachusetts for Dunkin' or Illinois for McDonald's. These are your neighbors, your people that live in your community. So sometimes people don't understand that very well.
No, they really don't. Now, the franchise industry. We love talking about the franchise industry because we really truly believe it's one of the ways that most immigrants have actually been able to start, or gain a piece of that American dream. And a lot of your members are immigrants that have been able to really participate in this great experiment called America, right, where you can have part of that American dream. But there's a lot that's threatening your industry was actually in the Obama administration, and now has kind of come back. Unfortunately, the Biden administration. I think in particular the Joint Employer and the PRO Act. I know those are two areas of importance for you to talk about. So if you don't mind, let's talk about that right now.
Yeah, well, on the joint employer, the position of the CFA pretty much is that we feel that we are independent business people. The franchisor is the franchisor. We are the franchisee, and we don't really have any interest in the joint employer issue. We really feel that we both need to stand on our own, and we don't want corporate headquarters, telling us how to run our daily business. We don't want them to tell us who to hire, who to fire. I mean, we are, as we said, independent business people, and we want to remain independent. So we definitely do not support anything that has to do with joint employer, right? So
right. Now, Elaine, I know that you and the foundation, you guys have been talking about joint employer. Just for folks listening, kind of would you mind kind of talking a little bit more about what that's doing to joint employer and what it's basically trying to do, I should say?
Well, the thing that we've been trying to get across through our messaging and through folks like John is the joint employer is essentially going to take away the franchisee autonomy and make them more of like a general manager reporting up into a franchisor. That's not what the franchisor wants. That's not what the franchisee wants. And it all really has to do with sort of the liability side of things, that if a franchisee on the local hiring area, makes a mistake or does something and they're dealing with an employment issue or whatever it is, they want to connect that employer, that franchisee, to the franchisor so that they're liable. And it goes back to the deeper pockets. It goes back to the unionization and being able to sort of bring them all under one umbrella. And all of those employees, you talked about tens of thousands of franchisees within the CFA system. Well, that equates to millions of employees, and being able to kind of unionize them from the top down.
Yeah.
Right now, if you're all individual small business owners, you've got 30 stores. Somebody else might have 5. Somebody else might have 1. They can't unionize all of those stores at once. But if they make you all part of the franchisor system and reporting into them like that, they can just unionize from the top down. And that's the prize.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. We know that, right?
Yeah. No, it really is. And by the way, once they can unionize, not only do they get a great membership base, the increasing their membership base, but it's money, millions and millions, hundreds of millions, actually, when you do the calculation of union dues. And I have to say it, but 90% of those union dues usually go to the Democrat Party. And so this to me is, a great way of funding, their leftist agenda, which is unfortunate. And I know we don't like talking about necessarily a partisan approach here when you talk about franchisees, but it is going to impact, I think, the franchise community if something like joint employer goes through. And so, from your professional perspective as the chair of the CFA, but also just as as a franchisee yourself, what do you think would happen if the joint employer does go through?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, we don't know, right? Because right now we're all independent, so it's really hard to say what could happen. I mean, it could, the franchisor could take some type of legal action or make us sign some legal documents that would put more burden on us, or of course, a franchisor is not going to want to take on any new liabilities. So I think the documents would come in fast and furious on ways that would protect them from anything, and and that at the end of the day could hurt us, right? So The unknown is the unknown, but I really don't see anything good coming out of a joint employer, resolution.
One of my concerns, I think, John, I don't know if this is, you agree with this or not, is that it would actually probably limit the ability for future entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs that want to get a franchise of their own, because the franchisor might not want to take risk on brand new franchisees, right? Because why would they want to? If now all of a sudden they're legally liable, they're just going to want to just, frankly, continue with you and growing your business. But they might not want to be able to give that new budding franchisee, minority entrepreneur, the same break that you had when you first started.
Yeah. And what it might, Dunkin' is pretty much, I would say 99.5% franchisee owned, right? It could also, have franchisors say, well, we're not going to franchise anymore. If we're going to take on the responsibility,
Right.
we'll just own the store, right? So to your point, Alfredo, it could limit, franchisees growing. It could limit new franchisees coming in because, if I'm a franchisor and now I have equal liability as a franchisee, I'm saying to myself, well, why don't I just run the store myself? If I'm
Right.
liable for it, I might as well take on the risk too and own the stores and not franchise anymore. So,
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying it will happen, but there's that potential.
I have a funny feeling that it could really hurt your industry. I mean, it's a very concern. I mean, I know that, a lot of the folks that I'm talking to in this industry are really, really concerned about this.
I was actually going to say make the same comment. I went right where you went with increasing barriers to entry for somebody who wants to get into the become a franchisee, because it's such a great system to buy into, that the barriers to entry would become even greater because a franchisor is not going to want to take those chances. So Alfredo and I were two great minds think alike, right?
And going back, another point Alfredo said earlier, where, franchising is a great opportunity for, immigrants to get into the business world. It's, pretty simple. You got to meet some criteria, but, it is definitely a road that many immigrants, like I said, my family, who are all immigrants, they took on the franchising with Dunkin'. And with that one gentleman who started in Providence, Rhode Island with his first store, our group of Portuguese franchisees, either directly related or distantly related or very good friends, today we own over 3,000 locations in the United States.
Wow.
That's pretty much, 25% of the entire Dunkin' brand. And it's pretty much all Portuguese immigrants. And I also would have to say that, the Indian community also has a large population of, Indian immigrants that have also become Dunkin' franchisees in the Midwest, in the Mid-Atlantic area. So, those opportunities could seize with a joint employer mandate, right?
Yeah. Well, John, that you've got our support on fighting this fight, because I think it's something that, of all the fights that we've had to take on, I still think this might be one of the biggest ones that we have to make sure we win on, because I'm just really concerned for this entire model. I think will fall apart, and with the wonderful stories like you've just shared, I think will be harder to be recreated in the future. And so, again, it's something that you've got our support on. And so, but going back to Dunkin' for a second, because I did want to talk about that. You guys went through this wonderful rebranding, and I'm a former marketer myself. I think this rebranding has been fantastic. What's your reaction to it? What have been the reaction to the from the franchisees on it?
I mean, it's been very, very positive. I like the rebranding. I like, personally removing the name Donuts out of the Dunkin' Donut name.
Yeah.
I have locations in New England and I have locations down in Virginia. And it was amazing when I went to Virginia, how customers perceive Dunkin' so much differently than they perceived it in New England. And believe it or not, donuts had a big part of that reason, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Up in New England, our product mix is probably 60% beverages, right?
Right.
When I went down to Virginia, it was probably 50 or less percent. It was, but donuts in New England probably attributes to like 6 to 8% of sales.
Wow.
Down in Virginia, it was like in the 20%
Wow.
percent, right? And
Yeah.
people saw Dunkin' Donuts in different parts of the country as a donut brand, where in New England we already had trained them it was a beverage brand.
Right.
So we wanted to become more of a beverage brand than a donut brand.
Yeah.
So the marketing and the rebranding it to just Dunkin', I think what has done amazing things to our brand.
Yeah.
Now down in Virginia, our beverage mix now is well over 50%, and so it worked. So
Yeah.
it did work, and it worked to the benefit of us franchisees.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's great. Like I said, I loved working with you guys as a vendor and met a lot of franchisees over my years there. Hitting those stores, and I always remember, the push for beverage was really important, and it's great to hear that it's actually been working, and that this rebranding effort really has been a success. And you know, there was another very famous restaurant franchise out there. It's actually not a franchise, I believe. I think these are company owned, but Kentucky Fried Chicken, where they're rebranding. They don't know what they are. They go from KFC to fried chicken
Yeah.
to KFC again, right? So, but I think you guys have nailed it. So it's exciting to see that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's like I said, it's been a home run for us at Dunkin'.
Yeah, that's good.
Hey folks, Elaine Parker here with Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Why is China hoarding food? Experts say that China is hoarding a massive amount of food. They will soon have over 2/3 of the globe's corn reserves, over half of its rice, and over half of its wheat. What does this mean for Americans like you and me? 2 words: food shortages. That's why it's a smart idea to stock up on a kit of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. They're hand-packed in the USA. The kits are compact and stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And their 5-star reviews on the website rave about the flavor and taste. Get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriots survival food by typing in the code STREET at checkout. Just go to 4patriots.com and use code STREET to get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriots survival food. That's 4patriots.com and use code STREET. Hey John, how does somebody get started in franchise, opening a franchise, and what are some of the biggest mistakes you see new franchisees make?
Well, to get into Dunkin' franchise, I mean, there is some criteria. You got to have, X amount of net worth, and meet the criteria that Dunkin' has put forward. In today's world, you see a lot more, bigger venture capitalists and bigger other brands, that have other restaurants coming in as franchisees of Dunkin', right? For the one person to come in as a one person franchisee and start, I mean, it is possible. What I would recommend for that one person is, go and work at a restaurant with another franchisee and see if it's something that you really think you want to be involved in, if it's something you like to do. Because looking out from outside, it looks like a great franchise, but there's a lot involved, a lot of work. If I didn't work hard in my first few years as a franchisee, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. So for the guy who thinks that, unless the guy is loaded with money or the lady is loaded with money, if you think you're going to invest your money, sit back and on the beach and just let the business run on its own. It doesn't normally work like that. Like I said, if you are pretty well established, maybe, but if you are a new franchisee getting into the system, you got to remember, you got to work hard and, work the business for at least a few years to get it off the ground, because otherwise you will fail. If you think that you're going to buy it and just sit back and the money's going to roll in, it doesn't usually work like that. You got to put in some sweat equity into the business to make it successful in the beginning, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I
absolutely.
did.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, we talked a little bit about joint employer. I know we've worked with you directly on the minimum wage and how that impacts your stores. I imagine that you probably employ a lot of young people, maybe in school or college. And talk a little bit about how the mandated minimum wage impacts your businesses.
You know, when we talk about minimum wage, to be totally honest, I don't know when I've paid minimum wage in the last 5, 6 to 10 years, right? You can't employ anybody with the new minimum wage, under the minimum wage package, right? I would say most employers are paying at or above whatever the minimum wage requirement is in their municipality, right? If you're paying minimum wage, you're probably, and I hate to say it this way, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel for employees, and as Alfredo knows, and I know dearly, that is the number one issue affecting employees. I mean, employers like me today is trying to find employees to work, right? So that is a huge issue for us today. And not to get off the subject, but but it's an important topic. Is the lack of employees, right?
Right.
In May, the U.S. Department of Commerce came out with these figures. Maybe Alfredo, I've seen them. That if every unemployed person in the United States got a job today, there would still be 4 million jobs with no one working there. So there are 10 million jobs available. There are 6 million people, quote unquote, unemployed today. So if those 6 million people got a job, right, there would still be 4 million jobs opened, right? So where do you find those people? And the most frustrating thing for me is going to Washington, D.C., meeting with members of Congress, and whether they're Republican or Democrat, this is not a partisan issue, right? Everyone I speak to, they go, what's your number one issue? I go, we can't find employees. And almost all of them have the same answer. Oh, we hear that from all our constituents, which for me is basically them telling me they're failing, right?
Yeah, right.
If I'm a congressman or working for a congressman and I make a statement like that, I mean, it should be embarrassing to them, because, if they're hearing that from all, quote unquote, their constituents, and they haven't done anything about it, we have a problem in this country. Aren't they there to serve us and to help us with our issues? If that is the number one issue facing employers, and I don't care if it's the medical field, the construction field, the hotel field, restaurants, teachers. I just saw an email that came to me yesterday. The public transportation system in New Hampshire, on the seacoast of New Hampshire, has cut their routes pretty much because they can't find drivers to drive the buses. I mean, so it's every industry, and every member of Congress knows this is an issue, but I can't figure out why can't they fix it. I mean, I've told them personally, I could go to DC in 24 hours, I would fix this problem, right? But it seems like it's too easy for them to fix the problem.
Now, John, I'm glad you've actually brought this issue up, because I know it is something that you and I have talked about for years, and even with Labor Secretary Acosta when he was in office. I know you guys are promoting a couple of ideas on this front, on this kind of solutions. Do you want to talk about those a little bit? What CFA is looking at trying to get across the finish line here?
Yeah, well, we're working with Misty Celli, who has her own labor coalition right now. She kind of spins. Alfredo knows Misty. She used to be our executive director. She left us, and she has her own coalition on labor. And we've been working closely with Misty. And, Well, one of the things we're working on is with the AARP. As we all know, like, retirees retire, let's say at 65, they get a pension, but they are limited on how many hours of they can work a week before they start get penalized on their retirement, right? Their retirement
Right,
pay.
right.
So one of the things we're trying to do there is take that away. These are good employees. With the recession the way it is, they need extra cash to pay their rent, their taxes, to buy food, to buy gas.
Yeah.
Allow these good employees to go get a job without any restrictions on them, right? I mean,
Right.
that would help. And as we all know, those are good employees. They've got that background of work ethic that we are looking for. So that's one of the issues. I mean, the big elephant in the room, Alfredo, and you know it as well as I do, is, and I say this, is we need an immigration plan that would allow us to bring in employees, legally, to work into our system. I mean,
Right.
if you have a gap of 4 million people that can't fill jobs, how do you produce those people? You have to import them. You have to bring them in and bring them into the industry, right? And talking to the government, and Alfredo and everybody that works with the government knows this well. The Republicans are dug into what they believe. The Democrats are dug into what they believe. They can't come to a consensus. So an immigration policy with a new visa program could fix this problem tomorrow, right? But because they're so dug in on their philosophies, they can't get to the middle to come up with a solution to help this immigration problem, right? Which is, as an employer, it is very frustrating to me that it's an easy solution, but they just can't, because of politics, get to a place that would benefit the business world.
Well, John, and I might be slightly cynical, but if a solution actually was developed, how are the lobbyists going to make money?
Yeah, that's the problem. They get in the way. I know. You may not agree with me on this, but this is another point I bring up to them. We currently have 5 million people that have crossed the border illegally.
7 million now.
Now it's up to 7. Okay. In the last few years, why don't we give them, the ones that are being processed at the border, not the ones that are sneaking in, but there are people that are being processed. Why doesn't the government just give them a work authorization number that tomorrow they can go out and get a job, versus us providing them with a hotel, us providing them with food?
Right.
Take the burden off the taxpayer, give them a work authorization number that they can come to my Dunkin' Donuts and I can legally hire them. Today, because Dunkin' requires us to do the E-Verify program, I cannot hire anyone that was not legally, eligible to be employed. But if the government gave these people a work authorization number, they could all get jobs tomorrow. With the amount of jobs that are out there, they could all legally get jobs. They would pay taxes. We would know where they are, right? So it's a win-win for everybody. It's a simple solution because they're processing immigrants at the border today. Just give them a work authorization number. I mean, you can get that done tomorrow, right? You can sign something and give them authorization to get work visas or work numbers tomorrow and start that process, right? But it seems like it's too simple of an idea. And again, the Republicans may balk at it because, we're giving illegals a bonus for coming in, right? But they're coming in anyways. So instead of having the taxpayer pay for them, have them, work and provide for their families.
Right.
And many of them want to work. I mean,
Absolutely.
what we've
That's
seen,
why they come here.
Right.
Yeah, what we've seen is just such a breakdown in the work ethic of Americans, of younger Americans, since the pandemic. I mean, we had a government policy that was being passed, legislation that was being passed that paid people to stay home. And I hear nonstop from our small business owners that talk about these people just don't have any work ethic at all. And they describe, I had one restaurant owner in South Florida who said he offered a bonus just to come fill out an application, $500 to come fill out the application. He said he got
Yeah.
2 people.
Yeah. And the sad part is you set up interviews, you'll set up 6 interviews with the hope of 1 or 2 people showing up, right? Because people do not show up even for their interviews after they've accepted to come in. So what my people do, and I've heard this from many other employers, they'll schedule 6, 8 interviews at one time because they know if they get 2 showing up, they've done well.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, exactly.
I know the lack of labor is a constant issue, especially in the service industry and your industry, and so it does need to be addressed. And I hear your frustration that in DC. It seems as though they've taken their political sides. The lobbyists love that division because the more division, the more they get paid, the longer
Absolutely.
they keep the issue going, and so. We got to figure out a way of really addressing that because there has to be a solution. As business owners, I'm sure you guys are faced with problems constantly. You have to come up with a solution. You don't have the ability to just say, "I hear you."
I know, but Alfredo, let's be real. There is only one solution. There is a net 4 million jobs that cannot be filled after everybody in this country is employed. So the solution is one and one only. We need people. We don't have enough people. We need to bring people into this country. And whichever way they do it, set up a new visa program, give the current people that are coming in work authorization, whatever it is, that is unfortunately the only solution because, unless we come up with, 4 million robots that can pour coffee tomorrow, there's no other solution.
Right. Well, interesting that you say that, though. Automation seems to be really creeping in, one, because of the labor costs, but 2, because of the lack of labor availability. I mean, my McDonald's, for example, in Virginia down the street, there's no more cashiers. They have these kiosks you order from, and they just have people putting out the food. And so all the cashiers are gone. So, it kind of forces really an automation, I guess, but I know that's not the answer. I mean, we really do have to kind of have a model that works on, I think, both elements of that.
Absolutely. No, automation has to come in, even us at Dunkin, we are starting to put in kiosks also, but not every job can be automated, right?
Yeah.
You want a coffee made a certain way, unless you press all these kind of buttons, I want 6 of this and 3 creams and 4 sugars and, to get it the way you want it, that technology isn't there yet. Maybe it will be, but today you need somebody that you talk to or you put it on your, on the app and it goes to a person and they actually need to physically make that coffee the way you ask for it. Right.
So. Absolutely. Although I think it's Chipotle has come up with a guacinator that actually peels the avocados, cuts them up, and gets you ready to smash them into guac. So I don't know, John. Maybe there will be a point where you have a robot for everything.
Well, I don't think it'll be in my lifetime, but it's possible. It will happen. I mean, if we can't import employees, we have to get robots then, because that's the only answer. And you all know as well as I do, this current new generation, they're not much about having children anymore, right? They say it's too expensive. They just don't want to have kids anymore. So what's going to happen 10 years from, 15, 20 years from now, when this new generation are not having kids, there's even going to be less to choose from. So it's either going to be automation or immigration. To solve these issues.
Well, John, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to listen. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. Please subscribe at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Goodbye for now.